Okay, everyone, welcome to the Pastor Class. This is our Holy Week edition of Pastor Class. This is our final week of taking a look at the timeline of Holy Week. We can do this work throughout the year, but we're going to end this particular Pastor Class topic and today. But I've been so thankful to have been able to take this journey with you all. It's been really exciting and fun for me because I've gotten to play with spreadsheets and I like doing that. I also just, I think it's always really good to just spend time flipping through each of the gospel accounts to take a look at some of the things that are similar and different, to see the different perspectives. We've been trying to investigate the timeline of Holy Week, and it's not easy work. It's still uncertain. And let me just say this, no matter what days that what day you picked as the day Jesus was crucified, or the day that the Last Supper took place, the reality remains that that Jesus lived, that he taught and instructed and revealed that he is the Christ, the Messiah. He died and he was raised again. And we have some fun kind of speculating and trying to take our positions. But at the end of the day, the gospel message is not going to be impacted by which view of what day of Holy Week that Jesus actually was crucified on. And so just take that as a friendly reminder that that we can even disagree on which day, and it's okay. And I don't think anybody says, "Hey, I've definitely got it all figured out," and this, you have to believe this. But what's great about this is it's gotten us back into the Word and to investigate the Scriptures. So I'm really thankful to have gone through this journey with you. Before we begin, Joanne had some questions, and I'm going to return us to another passage of Scripture. We're going to go to Exodus chapter 12, and I'll pull this up here. And okay, in Exodus chapter 12, we see God's requirements for his people regarding the Passover. And so let's take a look at Exodus 12, verse 1. Who will read verses 1 through 6?
The Lord said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, "This month shall be for you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year for you. Tell all the congregation of Israel that on the 10th day of this month, every man shall take a lamb according to their father's houses, a lamb for the household. And if the household is too small for a lamb, then he and his nearest neighbor shall take according to the number of persons, according to what each of you..." I'm sorry, I'm watching the neighbor's dog and it's scratching at my back door. Back to verse 4. And if the household is too small for a lamb, then he and his nearest neighbor shall take according to the number of persons, according to what each can eat. You shall make your count for the lamb. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male, a year old. You may take it from the sheep or from the goats, and you shall keep it until the 14th day of this month, when the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill their lambs at twilight.
Okay, so there's some actually really good information here about what's going on during Passover week. So every Israelite household, or if their household is too small, then you might share with another household. They're all to bring into their homes on the 10th day of the month a lamb, and they're to basically have that lamb in their home for until the 14th day. And then at the end of the 14th day, again, remember the Jewish days ended at 6 p.m. about, or sundown. And so at the end of the 14th day, then they would kill their lamb at twilight. And so then they would, it would actually be technically the 15th day of the month. And so, and then they would have a meal. We know that they were to put blood on the doorposts, the blood of the lamb. They were to eat it. They were to eat it quickly. We know the sort of the rest of the story. And then it says, "This day shall be for you a memorial day, and you shall keep it as a feast to the Lord throughout your generations, as a statute forever. You shall keep it as a feast." And then it says, 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. On the first day, you shall remove leaven out of your houses. For if anyone eats what is leavened from the first day until the 7th, that person's cut off. And on the first day, you shall hold a holy assembly. And on the 7th day, a holy assembly. No work shall be done in those days, but what everyone needs to eat, that alone may be prepared by you. And you shall observe the feast of unleavened bread. For on this very day I brought your host out of the land of Egypt. Therefore you shall observe this day throughout your generations as a statute. In the first month, from the 14th day of the month at evening, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at evening. For 7 days no leaven is to be found in your houses. And if anyone eats what is leavened, that person will be cut off from the congregation of Israel. And so there is this feast that takes place from Nisan 15, basically at the sundown, until the 21st. And so there's 7 days there. Now, Paul, I believe you've given us a little bit of background as well on how sometimes even there's some of the food is eaten on the 14th as well. Can you explain that again, Paul?
Yeah, there's those of us, who are most familiar with Western Christianity sometimes don't understand how complicated calendar things can be. I don't know if any of you have Greek or Russian Orthodox friends, and they had big schisms over calendar changes when they went from the Julian to the Gregorian calendar. Same thing in the Jewish community. To this day, the number of days observed between the Orthodox and Reform differs. And there's some thought that the Galileans counted things a little bit differently than the people in Jerusalem. So modern Jews outside of Israel observed 8 days to make sure they had the correct 7 days.
Okay. So kind of interesting, and this just goes back into the we're just not certain, and so while we come up with our own theories, maybe just a show of hands, how many of you have sort of settled on, I'm going to go with the tradition, and I'm going with Jesus crucified on a Friday? How many of you would say that's probably where you're at? Okay, so the majority of folks here, very good. So I'm going to pull up a little graphic here, and this is the traditional timeline here. You can see the night and the day here, and this one has Nisan 14 as being a part of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and so technically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It included so Paul, perhaps whoever came up with this one says, yeah, it's kind of included, and then it zooms in here on the timeline here, and so it talks about how it uses the scriptures, right? The day of preparation of Passover. So they were preparing, and then Jesus is crucified. The Last Supper would have been the Passover meal, according to this understanding. Then Jesus would have been crucified on Friday. He would have been in the grave, and on the first day of the week, in John 21, we see that he is raised. And so this kind of takes John as lifting up more of the timeline for us. In the email I sent you guys, did you guys see some of the articles that I sent? One of them was an article on the challenge of who got the timeline right. Was it Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John? And there's pros and cons for each of them, right? Mm-hmm. And so we're trying to harmonize all this stuff. But yeah, this is the traditional traditional practice. Some of you who say, you know what, I'm kind of siding right now with Friday crucifixion. What were some of the reasons that you that or some of the things, the evidences that you would say, you know, I'm going with this one?
When I started investigating this, it just kept getting deeper and deeper. Google can be a bad thing because you keep getting in and you just get other opinion and other opinion. What I ended up basing everything on, whether it's right or not, is Mark 15, verse 42. And that tells me it was the day before the Sabbath. But as you stated earlier, Paul, none of this really matters. It doesn't matter if it was on the third day, after 3 days, whatever. Jesus died for our sins and he rose from the dead. It's the rest of this, you have differences in the way things are translated. There's the argument that, well, there were far too many things that needed to happen. The timeline wasn't big enough to fit all those in. But at the end of the day, like I said, through exhaustive investigation, I'm going to stick with the traditional.
Okay.
Just based on Matthew 15:42.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. I like it that you're making your position stance based on the scriptures, and that is helping to be your guide. And so that's we definitely want, no matter what, we want to be able to say, you know, I think this because the scriptures say. And so really that's true for any sort of theological position we may want to take, or any speculation we want to do. We always want to be able to say, because the word of God says, this is now my conclusion. So that's a great place to be. Anybody else?
The wonderful thing about this study was, like you said before, it gave us a chance to investigate, to dig deeper into the word, go from book to book. What does this book say? What does this gospel say? Et cetera, et cetera. And that's never a bad thing. But at the end of the day, I think we just have to look at this as, if it really mattered that much, it would have been thoroughly spelled out in the word.
Okay, sure.
There would have been no doubt about it.
Sure. Okay, some others that would take the traditional day, and what were some of your thoughts?
I looked at two major things. One is that, you know, the resurrection takes place on Sunday, according to the scriptures. And the other thing, the incident in scripture where they were very concerned to get the bodies off the crosses before the beginning of Sabbath. So that's, and I don't see any issue with the 3 days, because by Jewish counting, because they were buried before sundown, that counts as the first day of the Messiah's burial. And then Friday night to Saturday is the second day, and Saturday night to Sunday morning is the third day, the 3 days.
Okay, very good. Very good.
My only problem with that is scripture also says 3 days and 3 nights.
Okay, yeah. So Harry, hold that thought. Let's just still stick with those that are reasons for going with a Friday date. And but I like where your mind's at, Harry. We're still challenging one another here. This is good. Any other comments on the traditional Friday crucifixion? Okay, well, I want to move now to even one of the things, probably where I was at beginning, was a Wednesday or a Wednesday crucifixion. So a Good Wednesday versus a the traditional Friday view, Good Friday. And Wednesday, I don't have, actually, did anybody have, like, would anybody say, you know, I'm kind of leaning towards a Wednesday day. Did anybody, would anybody say that that's them?
No.
No? Okay, let me show you something. I got to try and find it here. I thought I had it pulled up, but I don't. Let's see here. Oh, no. Okay. Oh, no, that's not it. That's not it. Let's see. Well, I may just have to, when I find it again, I can't find it right now. Here, maybe I can just show you on my video screen. So I don't know if you guys can see this. Oh, it's backwards too. Dang it. It mirror images it. Let's see here. I'm going to have to just send you an email. Well, basically, the arguments here are for a Wednesday, Good Wednesday crucifixion, is that the scriptures say 3 days and 3 nights. So it really focuses and emphasizes, puts a lot of emphasis on the 3 days and 3 nights. Where that is really coming from is in the Matthew passage. So because Matthew includes the 3 days and 3 nights, let's see here. If I go to Matthew 12, oh, I need to share my screen again. If we go to Matthew 12, I believe I sent an email. I think Mark also talked about the sign of Jonah. I think John may have even as well, but here's what it says. Then some of the scribes and Pharisees answered him, saying, "Teacher, we wish to see a sign from you." But he answered them, "An evil and adulterous generation seeks for a sign, but no sign will be given to it except the sign of the prophet Jonah. For just as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth." Some of the arguments for a Wednesday really stem on this verse right here. Matthew is the only one to not just say the sign of Jonah, but actually specify that it's 3 days and 3 nights.
I don't understand why that comes to Wednesday. I think that can support a Thursday crucifixion.
Well, and I will agree with you, Paul, but the challenge with the Thursday is you do not get a full 3 days and 3 nights. So you only end up with part of 3 days, but you still get the full 3 nights. So that's
but the word day in Hebrew is elastic. It doesn't always have to mean 24 hours.
Right. So that would be an argument against the Wednesday. And so that's the big question is, does this have to be a literal 72 hours or are partial days and nights okay? Gosh, I really need to get this find this graphic here because it just makes it so much more clear. I'm going to have to find it later. It's not one of the ones I had prepared here for us. Well, here's what I'll say. I think that a Wednesday timeline actually follows it makes the most sense if you look at a Matthew, if you have Matthew as the focus of your chronology. And so as we have Matthew We have him leaving Jericho. We have the triumphal entry. Really, we would all agree, I think, that the triumphal entry happened on Sunday morning. We know that John had said 6 days before the Passover that Jesus arrived. And then what's kind of interesting here is that Exodus 12:3 says Passover lambs are to be taken into each household on the 10th. Well, 6 days before the Passover, basically John has Jesus arriving in Bethany, and would have arrived before the Sabbath began because he wouldn't have been allowed to travel on the Sabbath. And so he arrives in Bethany, and then they gave a dinner for him there. Martha served, and it's kind of interesting. This is the exact same time or day, because the Hebrew day started for the 10th, that they are to take in the Passover lamb on the 10th. So that's kind of pretty neat here. So you have the Passover lamb being brought in. Jesus is anointed. I don't know if the Passover lambs were anointed, but I imagine that they were. They certainly were well cared for.
Yeah, they wouldn't have been taken in on the Sabbath. So I think it's more likely they were taken. The 10th of Nisan that year was a Sunday, the same day that the Messiah has the triumphal entry.
Okay, the next day.
Yes, and there's a ceremony in the Talmud where the high priest walks through the streets to remind people to finish all their preparation, carrying a lamb to remind everyone to finish their extensive preparations to get rid of all chametz, which takes a lot of cleaning.
Right. And I mentioned some of that on Sunday. I was shocked to see some videos of the explanations of how you clean everything. It was really remarkable. It's a lot of work to get a house ready for Passover. So yes, then the triumphal entry on Sunday, the next day following would have happened. Then we have Matthew continues to basically say that Jesus cleansed the temple this same day, that he healed the blind and the lame. And then we have that he went out of the city back to Bethany. So he returns to Bethany. Matthew continues to take us 3 days before the Passover. It was the morning, and Jesus curses the fig tree. And I'm going to slide down here. And then Matthew has us Jesus entering the temple, teaching parables, different parables. He's challenged by the Pharisees and the Herodians. And then we see language in Matthew that says that same day, the Sadducees ask him the question about the resurrection. This same story is in Mark and in Luke. He gets tested by the scribe or the lawyer, and then talks about David, and then warns against the scribes, and does the 7 woes in Matthew 23. And then Matthew 23 also has his lament over Jerusalem. Now, I put a little note here because Luke actually places the lament over Jerusalem up after the triumphal entry. Okay. Or really before the triumphal entry, as he's coming into the city. So these are probably the same. They're referring to the same story, but you can see that they position them differently. However, it could be that Jesus wept over Jerusalem more than one day. And so there could have been, he could have wept over Jerusalem after, during the triumphal entry, and also lamented over Jerusalem after a day of teaching and sharing parables in the city. So regardless, that probably likely happened that at some point Jesus was lamenting over Jerusalem. Then Matthew continues. It says that he left the temple. And so his lament over Jerusalem would have actually been in Jerusalem. And so at some point Matthew has him leaving the temple. And then we get the Olivet Discourse in Matthew 24 through 26, basically. Jesus is teaching on the end times up on the Mount of Olives, and then we have then the chief priests and the scribes, they're looking to arrest and to kill Jesus by stealth. I find it interesting how a lot of stuff with the chief priests and the scribes, like it's kind of interesting to note what takes place during the nighttime and in the darkness with the chief priests and the scribes. So I thought that's kind of interesting. And then his head is anointed and Judas seeks to betray Jesus. Again, it's possible that, I think it's kind of almost even probable that this is going on during the night, or at least Matthew is recording it as so. And then Matthew has a Tuesday. There is the preparation for the Passover. And I noted a translation difficulty that I had, and that is that there's this word protos, which could be translated either first or before.
Okay.
And so the ESV translation says that Matthew should be translated on the first day of unleavened bread, and I translated it, but before the breads. This is the PBV is the Paul Bammel version, and so in the literal rendering is literally either but the first breads or but before the breads. And breads is listed plural here, and so I think it is referring to unleavened bread. So I think a better translation might be but before the unleavened bread. So basically, before we get to the feast of unleavened bread, they were to prepare for this time. And so we have the preparation of the Passover, and that's kind of all that Matthew has going on Tuesday, unless there's a couple other places in here where, well, maybe there was a shift in time. And so I've noted a couple times where there may have been a shift in time up here, and there may have been a shift in time, which would then move everything down. But as it is, maybe this is taking place. And then I didn't know where to put these times with John. Basically, there's some point during the week, some Greeks came to see Jesus. There was a thundering voice from heaven. There's the unbelief of the people. I'm not really certain I know where to put that, but that happened at some place. But I was kind of mainly focusing on Matthew here. And that seemed like a pretty good way as the disciples are preparing for the Passover. Then these Greeks are coming, and so it seemed to fit sort of there. So I thought that might work there.
Okay.
Then Matthew has the prediction of Judas' betrayal. Then we have the Lord's Supper, and Peter's denials are foretold. And then Jesus, we have him praying in Gethsemane. I'm kind of leaning towards the high priestly prayer in John happening in Gethsemane, but it may have happened separately, and then Jesus is just praying more on his own. But we have the betrayal and arrest of Jesus, and the religious council, Jesus going before them again at nighttime. This would have been an illegitimate court, and Peter actually denies Jesus the 3 times. And this is kind of interesting to me that John actually includes Peter's first denial. Then he skips down to a story about Jesus being mocked and questioned before the high priest, and then he returns to Peter denying Jesus the 2nd and 3rd time. I just thought that was kind of interesting. So these are kind of all wrapped up into here. And then in the morning, Jesus is delivered to Pilate. Judas hangs himself. Jesus is silent before Pilate, and the crowd then chooses Barabbas. Pilate delivers Jesus to be crucified. He's mocked, he's beaten, he's crucified, and then we have his crucifixion, his death. We have the temple curtain torn from top to bottom. Truly, this was the Son of God, and women were there to witness it. And then we have the burial all before sundown. Now, again, if you follow the chronology, you're looking over here. This is just Wednesday day. And so this is actually this would, if this is correct, the this is Nisan 14, the day of preparation, and really basically at twilight the Passover lamb is to be killed, and so here you have he has to be put in the tomb. And so then basically if Jesus is put in the tomb here at this point, you have the first night, you have the first day, then on Thursday, which would have been a high holy day, right? Which would have been a high Sabbath day. And so, so it makes sense. There's no activity there. Then you have the second night on Thursday night. And then on Friday, there's a little thing in Mark that says that when the Sabbath was passed, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so that they might go and anoint him. And so they did some shopping. So this would suggest that, maybe they did their shopping on the Friday when they could. Now, one of my questions of this is, why wouldn't they just go to the tomb on Friday, like on that day? It would make more sense to me that if they bought the spices, they would have gone to prepare his body. But I don't, again, I don't know how all that works. But this was one of the evidences to me against a Wednesday crucifixion,
Okay.
that it just seemed odd that they wouldn't have gone that very day. And then we would then have the second Sabbath, the normal weekly Sabbath. So because Nisan 15 was a high Sabbath, then we would have the normal weekly Sabbath on the Friday. And so it makes sense then that Matthew would not have anything recorded from Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then we end up with the resurrection. Again, night 1, day 1, night 2, day 2, night 3, day 3, with Saturday day. And so that means basically anytime after the sunset on Saturday, Jesus then could have been resurrected. And you would then have 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, and 1, 2, 3 nights. And so anytime during the nighttime, you would have had, Jesus could have been resurrected. So he could have been resurrected at midnight, or and it would have aligned with the scriptures there on the 3 days and 3 nights. Then in this is a really interesting piece to note. In Matthew 28:1, it says Mary Magdalene and the other Mary, they go to the tomb, but it says after the Sabbath. And Matthew actually uses the plural for the word Sabbath. Most translations only translate it as a singular Sabbath, but Matthew 28:1, if I go to, oops. Okay, good. Yeah. So it says now after the Sabbath in most of our English translations. Again, that would have been the better way to render this is now after the Sabbaths, plural, and toward the dawn of the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went. So clearly there was again, it doesn't matter that they were separated like this. Matthew could have said that if the high Sabbath was also the same as the weekly Sabbath. And so Matthew's just mentioning that there actually are 2 Sabbaths here. So then we have the stone being rolled away. The people fled they fled the tomb, and the chief priests pay off the guard. So Matthew, I would argue that if you go with a Wednesday, you're probably leaning more toward a Matthew as having gotten the chronology correct. And so there are some that will do that. And largely, I think it really comes down to having an entire 72 hours, 3 full days and 3 full nights as the timeline. So none of us had that version. I'll send you another email with some more arguments and an explanation. And when I find that graphic, I'll try and send that as well. But I just find that really fascinating. Now, some would argue that a Thursday is the day of the crucifixion, and a good Thursday.
Makes sense, yeah.
For me, this is where I'm falling. I'm falling on a Thursday,
Okay.
and I'm getting there because I think that makes the most sense with lining up all the scriptures. To me, it makes the most sense, but I'm still not 100% convinced, and so I'll continue to explore this. But I feel like I'm in pretty good company because I believe Dr. Boyce also
Correct.
takes a Thursday crucifixion as
Correct.
well.
Yeah.
And so I'm happy to be in company with Dr. Boyce, and I want to walk through. But I think this one actually uses Mark as having the chronology correct. It seems to make sense that Mark was followed, and so this one seeks to this spreadsheet that I've come up with seeks to follow the Mark outline. Mark also has Jesus leaving Jericho. It says that he heals a blind Bartimaeus. Some of you guys saw that YouTube video that I sent out on the walk from Jericho. It's fascinating how there's two Jerichos, how there was and so to see where some of this stuff took place, well, was it municipal Jericho or was it the other Jericho? And so that was kind of fascinating to me, but it's interesting, Mark has blind Bartimaeus, but Matthew mentions that there's two blind men that he heals. He could have healed two. Again, you're getting different perspectives from these writers here. Then in Mark, we don't really know exactly when he arrived, but we all kind of take John. He says 6 days before the Passover. Well, if you go with with Nisan 15 being on a Thursday, then Thursday night, then you have to count back, and you end up with Passover -6 being on. Oh, whoa. I don't know why that just happened. Sometimes, man, my computer freaks out on me here. Uh-oh. I didn't do anything. I've just been in the same document. Uh-oh.
Maybe that's God telling you that's not the right answer.
Oh, yeah, maybe. So the problem I have is I have too many tabs opened up at the moment, and so my computer is struggling to render all of them. I think. Okay. Timeline. Come on, load up. So you can see here on this screen, I had a long time ago, I don't know where I got this, so I actually want to redo this, but I had taken a look at when are the Nisan 14s and Nisan 15s in the years, year 25 through 40. And this is what I was able to come up with. And so I thought it's kind of interesting that I don't see a Friday on this list for an option. But I do see a number of Thursdays. So that would be a little bit further evidence for me for the Thursday, a good Thursday.
There's also no Wednesday.
There's also no Wednesday here as well. Yes, that's correct. Now, there's actually some real trouble. It's interesting with our computers now. We know when the different eclipses occurred. Mm-hmm. And so it's easy for us to say, hey, this is when it was. But back then, there was a guy who would look up in the sky and say, okay, now is the day. And so there's even a little bit of discrepancy there with, we're not certain we know which days that they would have said Nisan 14, 15 was. It would have depended on whatever that guy who was in charge of that decided.
And before the beginning of Rabbinic Judaism, it was flexible how to overcome the leap year issue. And the rabbis would decide that the holidays were coming too early. They didn't line up with the agricultural emphasis. And they don't put a spare day in every 4 years. They put a spare month in every so often. And it's regulated now, but it's thought that before 300 AD, that it was done by observation of the sort of the senior rabbis.
All right, so this one to me was just kind of fascinating. If we go with a Thursday, so this means that Passover minus 6 days before the Passover, would have been either the Friday or Saturday, and Friday night or Saturday day. Since we know that Jesus would not have been traveling on the Sabbath, I feel comfortable that basically John would be accurate in saying he arrived 6 days before the Passover, and having that, basically he shows up as they're ready to start the Passover. And so that seems to be an accurate statement, whether or not he arrived the night before or then. So Jesus arrives in Bethany. It then reminds us as to why why there's really not much action there. And then this puts Nisan 10, the day when the Passover lambs are chosen, are brought into the household and paraded around. This then lines up really well with the triumphal entry. And so you have Jesus being paraded into the city, into the temple. He is the Passover lamb, and so now the whole idea with the Passover lambs is then the people had 4 days to inspect the Passover lamb as well. And so it makes sense then with his teachings and the questions that he's getting, they're inspecting the Passover lamb throughout to make sure that it's a pure, spotless lamb and all that. Then we have Mark has the triumphal entry actually coming late in the day because it says that he entered. It was already late, and so Jesus returned to Bethany. And so it says in Mark that he went into Jerusalem, he looked around, but then in the same verse, Mark 11:11, it says it was already late. And so Jesus then departed and left and went to Bethlehem. This is a change from Matthew and Luke, right? Matthew and Luke both have the cleansing of the temple at the same day as the triumphal entry. And so we have to say, well, wait a minute, one of these is wrong, right? Either Mark is wrong or Matthew and Luke are wrong. And this is, again, where I'll just remind us that it wasn't essential that they got the timeline accurate. What mattered more to the gospel writers was that they got the story right. And they could reposition things timeline wise in order to show an emphasis or to make a point somewhere else. So that's not really a problem for me that it doesn't line up, but this makes sense. Okay. He has the whole preparation of the donkey and the colt, and then that didn't really maybe happen until later in the day. And so he goes in, he takes a look around, and then he leaves. This would be kind of then. So the following day, Mark says this is when Jesus curses the fig tree. Mark then has the cleansing of the temple, and then we see that Mark then has an evening comes again, and so when evening came, they went out of the city. So because of this little time gap here of, I think more stuff probably happened. This is where for this account where I put the John stuff, where the Greeks come to seek out Jesus, the thundering voice from heaven, the unbelief of the people. Again, I don't know where these 4 things happened, but I've just put them in a position where it seemed like, there's maybe some space here that Mark gives us. So Mark 11:19, when evening came, so they go out of the city. And then the next thing Mark says is they pass by in the morning and the fig tree is withered. So he cursed the fig tree this morning. The next day, the tree is withered. This is where you see a whole lot of teaching and parables in the challenge of who Jesus is. So in Mark, you can see a number of the same parables and stories are used throughout. And Jesus then warns against the scribes in Mark. It's the same kind of like language a little bit. Matthew uses a much longer dialogue there. Then Mark and Luke include the widow's offering as he sat down. And then this is where Mark then says he came out of the temple. And so he would have come out of the temple and is foretelling the destruction of the temple. And then Jesus, the Mount of Olives, is teaching about the end times. And so all of the discourse basically here. And then the next thing Mark gives us is, he says, 2 days before the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And so again, if we look at our countdown to Passover, we see it's P-2. And so this would fit here. This is sort of a shift in time, but even if it was in the night, it's fine. And so this actually maybe could be the chief priests and scribes looking to arrest and kill Jesus by stealth. This makes sense that it could have happened even in the night. So Tuesday night, I don't know for sure, but I put it right here. And then we have Jesus' head being anointed at the house of Simon the leper in Bethany. And so this is this day of preparation. And then this is where I have a little bit of challenge, because then we see Judas, he's with the chief priests. And I moved basically Mark 14, the preparation for the Passover, to Wednesday night. But this is where I'm still not even convinced. Like, this might all belong up into Tuesday night. And then the preparation for the Passover then would fit in the daytime as well. And it would fit nicely there. Although this even could have, but I'm challenged where it says on the first day of unleavened bread. But I think, again, we have the challenge of the translation of, well, did this mean before the unleavened bread or the first day? And so again, we have that translation issue here.
Okay.
So either way, I think this timeline kind of fits here. And then we have, we basically have the Lord's Supper on the night that people still even today celebrate Pesach, which is the meal. I saw something recently that it's interesting that at the meal, there really isn't a mention of lamb at the meal. And so
there's no lamb, but there's a lamb bone. And they use the verses, the arm of the Lord is not too short. They hold up a shank bone.
Okay. So it's not specifically mentioned here in Mark, but that would be the traditional thing there. But this is why, Paul, it's so good to have you with us. And so then we have the institution of the Lord's Supper. We have Peter's deniers are foretold. Then, I mean, John, look at how much stuff John has regarding the night of Jesus' betrayal. Then we have Mark having Jesus praying, his arrest. I mentioned this the other day, but I love, there's a young man fleeing naked. And I think that is Mark. But again, this is speculation. I think Mark didn't want to mention himself as being naked. But I think that's a pretty traditional view that Mark was the one that was fleeing naked. Then they took Jesus to the high priest, Peter's denials of Jesus the 3 times. And then Jesus then is delivered to Pilate. He's silent before Pilate. Somewhere in there, Luke has that that Jesus was also taken to Herod. And so, but he's the only one that mentions that. So there was some time in here, and this would make sense then why Mark and others mentioned will mention multiple things going on, and that even gives some time to then where he's then silent before Pilate.
Okay.
The crowd choosing Barabbas. Pilate delivers him up. He's mocked. He's mistreated. The crucifixion. We know it was the 3rd hour, so 9 a.m. approximately. He would have been crucified, and then there was darkness from 12 to 3, and then the temple curtain is torn, and he is dead. And the centurion marks this with, truly this man was the Son of God. And again, I'm kind of putting general times out here. I don't know exactly when all, basically a number of things happened at the same time here. But then we have the death and then the burial of Jesus. And this would have had to take place before the Sabbath began. And so it even says that it was evening the day before the Sabbath. And so because this was a high holy day, then you would have Thursday night and Friday day being a high Sabbath. And it would make sense then that you wouldn't hear from Mark until not only the high Sabbath, but also the regular weekly Sabbath was over. And so Mark is silent basically from the burial of Jesus until Mark has, when the Sabbath was passed, Mary Magdalene, the mother of James and Salome, bought spices so that they might go and anoint him. And Paul, this is where you were actually pretty convincing for my shift. I was leaning towards a Wednesday crucifixion, but now I've settled on Thursday. But you mentioned that they would have likely opened the shops on Saturday night. And so this really made a whole lot of sense here.
Remember, they lived without refrigerators, so they needed to shop on an almost daily basis. So.
Right. So, and now the biggest challenge here with this one is, this is 2 days then of Sabbath in a row. Mm-hmm. And so I believe, Paul, you mentioned that they typically today would not do this. They would just...
They don't. They've jiggled the calendar to avoid problems, but it occasionally does happen that you have Sabbath and then the first day of Passover. It doesn't often happen the other way.
Oh, okay.
Because they are more comfortable making things a little bit more lenient on the Sabbath than on the first day of Passover.
Okay. And I think that may have been the case this year. Passover was either on Saturday or Sunday this year.
Yes, Saturday night. Yeah.
Okay. So they would have basically been, that would have been the case this year, that there would have been the Sabbath and then the high Sabbath following.
You have to be very careful because you don't have much time to get rid of any of the foods that have leaven if you have the Sabbath followed by the first day of Passover.
Okay. Well, again, just awesome stuff. So anyway, you have the tomb. The Sabbath was passed. They're in the shops. So they're not at the tomb. They're in the shops. And then they would have gone to bed. And then it says after the Sabbath in Matthew, the plural again. I think that's a really remarkable statement there. But it says very early on the first day of the week. This probably could even be put up into the darkness here. So they did their shopping, but they got some sleep and they got up very early. So as soon as their very first opportunity that they had, they were there at the tomb. They wanted to be there to anoint him with the spices that they had purchased. And then you have the rest going on as well.
Yeah, they couldn't have gone at midnight because even though the Sabbath was over, because the city gates would have been closed. And Jews never bury within a town. The cemetery has to be outside.
Okay, very good. Now I do think they were coming from Bethany, so they would have.
They would have been outside the city.
They would have been able to be outside the city. So, they probably left about 4 or 5 in the morning would be my guess. Yeah. In order to get to the tomb while it was still dark. And then basically the sun rises. And so with this, if we take a look at counting our days, you have Jesus dying on the 14th, being crucified on basically at the same time that the Passover Lamb would have been crucified, the Passover Lamb would have been killed on Thursday day. Remember, because at twilight is when you kill the Passover Lamb to prepare for Passover. So Mark, basically, the timeline here puts Jesus' death at the same time as the Passover Lamb for Israel. And so I think that's just very strong evidence for a Thursday crucifixion. And so again, counting days as parts of days, because he was killed during the daytime of the 14th of Nisan, then that would count as day one. Then you have night one on Passover night, day two on Passover, night two, which would be the Sabbath night.
Okay.
And day three, and then finally Saturday night you would have the final third night. And so you get the 3 days and 3 nights, albeit not a full 72 hours, but you still end up with the 3 days and 3 nights in the order of days and nights. And when if a Wednesday crucifixion puts a night first, and then it counts the days, and so it had the text basically switch the order to say he'll be in the grave 3 nights and 3 days, then I would have maybe thought that to be some evidence, but this would have the same order of the days here. And so for those reasons, I side with a Thursday, a good Thursday now, which is different than I was a month ago before we started this class. And so this is just super remarkable for me. What's really cool about this is if you're interested, I will be happy to give you a printout on an 11 by 17 paper of both of these. I haven't done the Friday one yet. I'm hoping to eventually do a spreadsheet of the Friday. Again, I may not have gotten this perfect, and especially I really have had trouble with, where was it? Yes, right here. These parts right in here, I'm still kind of wrestling. I think they maybe belong up in the nighttime, and then that would then have the preparation for the Passover basically being what's going on Wednesday. One of the challenges for this is that some people say, Paul, if the only thing that happened was the preparation for the Passover on Wednesday, this is sometimes referred to as Silent Wednesday. And so like, come on, there was more stuff that had to have happened there. And the problem of a Silent Wednesday is even more apparent if you go with a Friday crucifixion, because you simply run out of, like, there's so much stuff in so many days that the gospel writers put. So you have some of the challenges there. Again, does this matter? No, but it sure is really fun to explore. and this is where I'm settling. And I realize there's a little bit of difficulty with, 2 Sabbaths in a row is kind of difficult, but I think even the Matthew, the plural Sabbaths, really gives good evidence that this is the way it is. Anybody agree with myself and Dr. Boyce on the Thursday crucifixion?
I think there's strong, evidence for that. That's fine.
Yeah. All right. I got the stamp of strong evidence from Paul Cruz, so that's saying something there.
I have a question.
Sure.
For Paul. Is twilight considered the beginning of the day or the end?
The beginning.
Okay, because
in Genesis it says it was evening and morning the first day.
I know, but I didn't, because in Leviticus 23, verse 5.
Yes.
It says the Lord's Passover begins at twilight on the 14th. So does that mean it begins at the very beginning of the 14th day?
It does. Yeah. Yeah. The celebratory meal is right after a regular day, because you wait just for the sun to set.
So, okay, well then I'm really confused.
Wait, Leviticus what, Joanne?
23.
23. Leviticus 23 verse, you can start at verse 4.
Man, my computer is really running slow. Okay. So these are the appointed feasts of the Lord, the holy convocations, which you shall proclaim at the time appointed for them. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month at twilight,
right,
is the Lord's Passover. So I would argue that this is saying on the 14th day of the month, basically once the sun sets,
correct,
that's the Lord's Passover.
So in
Yes.
other words, it's on the 15th.
Correct.
And that's why you and Paul are both saying, because the next verse says, on the 15th day begins the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So that's why you and Paul are saying that Passover and unleavened bread are on the same day, because I was disagreeing with you that when I first came on earlier today. So basically,
Yes.
Yeah, they in modern usage, the unleavened bread is collapsed into the celebration of Passover as a
Okay.
whole. The other thing that nobody's commented on is it says the first month.
yes.
And Jewish usage actually has 4 New Year's days. So, one's for the priests, one's for the king, one's for counting your agricultural produce for tithing, and I forget what the 4th one is. So,
Oh,
'cause
that's really funny.
yeah, Nisan is not counted as the first, as the first month. Most of the Jewish New Year is celebrated in September. So.
Okay, well, the things that I liked about this current version that Paul showed us, because based on Leviticus, Lamb Selection Day is on actually, I don't think it's in Leviticus. I think it was in Numbers. Lamb Selection Day is on the 10th. That's the day
Right.
he
Right.
entered in. He was our lamb. I agree with that. So then the only problem I had was on the 14th and the 15th. I wasn't sure which day was really the Passover. Was it on the 14th at twilight, or was it on the 15th at twilight? So
Well,
Yeah.
once twilight comes, that counts as the 15th, the way the Jewish people reckon the
Okay.
calendar.
So in other words, based on this, we believe that Christ the Last Supper was not the Passover.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So
There's also documentation in non-biblical but ancient Jewish sources that the Galileans used to cheat and do Passover a day early. That's because they wouldn't have to wait in line to get their lamb, with the other 100,000 people if they did it that way. And the other thing is they could get back to Galilee faster. They were coming from a distance. So
that is hilarious.
Well, that would
Question,
make
Paul.
sense.
Oh,
I
go
mean,
ahead.
that would make sense since he was from Galilee, that he would celebrate it the day before, but he would still die for us when the lamb was supposed to be sacrificed.
right.
So
Yeah. So
Yeah.
one of the challenge of the that I've had with this view is that both like Matthew, I think Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all have something of the on the first day of unleavened bread. So if I go to let's see here, Mark 14.
Yeah, I read that too.
So, and on the first day of unleavened bread, but this is what's interesting about this. It says, on the first day of unleavened bread, when they sacrifice the Passover lamb. And so this is one of the reasons why I think it's a better translation to say, and before the Feast of the Unleavened Bread.
Okay, day of preparation.
The
Okay.
day of preparation. And that's where I really felt that this, So then that really makes sense then, because this is the day, right here is where they would prepare to then, like, the 14th is the day that they would be preparing to, that they would actually kill the Passover lamb. Right. So
Yeah.
again, Mark 14, because it says so on the first day of when they sacrifice the Passover lamb. So this is a bit of a challenge to me because then like it seems that this gets put to the next day. But because of
That's what Paul just said. He said, at least I think that's what he said. He said the twilight was at the end of the day. So it would have been Wednesday late at night when they were getting ready to sacrifice the lamb.
right.
Well,
So this,
actually, I guess he would have said it was like the 15th. Oh gosh, I don't know.
well, this is why I put the preparation for the Passover
Right.
Mhm.
on Wednesday night rather than Wednesday day.
Okay.
Because if I had put this on Wednesday day,
Mhm.
then that ends up being 2 days before the Passover, technically. But
Right.
if I put it at the night, and it would make sense that, hey, we're gonna have a meal. I want you to go and make preparations, and you could do it before. You could do it like anytime. You could do it after the sunset. The shops would be open. This is just a regular day. So, I don't know when most Jewish people would have gone to bed, but it wasn't like they went to bed at 6 o'clock, right?
Right,
There's
no.
stuff going on for several hours in here. And so I think you have enough time here to go and make the preparations or to take the stuff. You may even have purchased things here, but now you go and you take it anyway. So I think that makes the most sense. But this, again, it meant that I put this stuff on Wednesday, so I didn't have the problem of a silent Wednesday. And
Okay.
and so I acknowledge there's some challenges here, but and then the other thing is, it's really nice that Mark has Jesus arriving when the Passover lamb would have been chosen,
Yeah.
and that he has Jesus dying when the Passover lamb would have been killed. And so because that's so symbolic, that actually might be an argument against this position, because Mark may not have been trying to do a timeline. He may have been just trying to make the point that Jesus is the
Emphasize.
Passover
Okay.
lamb.
Another question.
Yeah.
Okay. So if he was being crucified, right around the time that the lamb would have been being sacrificed, if he was being crucified, like right as Passover was beginning, then I don't think Joseph of Arimathea would have made himself unclean and buried him, because then he wouldn't have been able to take part of the Passover, because he would have been unclean.
Yeah, Joanne, stay tuned for next year's sermon on this, because I'm so excited to preach on this next year. I mean, what Joseph of Arimathea did was he threw everything away. He totally was not willing to associate with Jesus during Jesus' life, but in his death, something triggered in Joseph of Arimathea, and he basically was throwing away his career. He was going to be, he associated with Christ in his death in a way that he did not in his life, and so that's going to be basically the emphasis of the sermon whenever I preach that next year, because I'm taking a break through Mark. I'm going to come back to it next year so we can go back through it again.
But he was still Jewish, and I don't know if he would have foregone like the Passover and made himself unclean. I don't know. Okay, I hope I can remember all this by next year.
So Joanne, what's kind of interesting is every gospel writer records about his action. About the burial, right? And so that's some pretty strong evidence that it did happen.
But I'm saying maybe we have the Passover wrong. Maybe the Passover was when he did have the Last Supper, and maybe he was actually sacrificed on the day of the 14th, which would have been after the Passover meal.
Well,
I don't know.
If Jesus was killed on the 14th, that would be the day before the Passover meal, right?
I don't know.
Yeah. The other thing, the description that the lambs are killed at twilight would be better. The practice was they started to be killed at twilight. There were thousands of lambs, so it was much later by the time they finished. It wasn't twilight anymore.
Okay. There's just too many. Yeah, that's fascinating. All right. Well, I did see a YouTube video as well this week of that in Jerusalem this year, they actually they did a trial run, so to speak, of sacrificing the lamb before the temple. There's some interesting stuff happening in Israel, and so I don't know if anybody's kind of keeping up with it, but there's a lot of people that thinking that another temple is going to be built on the Temple Mount pretty soon.
There's a group there. They've already made priestly garments and musical instruments according to what's both in the Bible and what's in the historical record.
Yep, and they've got some of the candles, the golden candles, and It's amazing. They're ready to go, but and apparently this year was the first year they like basically did like a trial run. They said this is not
Okay.
really the official sacrifice, but they are inching closer to. It's really fascinating to me.
I had a Jewish friend who was the equivalent of the InterVarsity or Campus Crusade. She was an advisor at Temple, a Jewish advisor at Temple. And for the kids who couldn't go home, she invited them over to her home for Passover. And one of them had an African roommate. And, he came along and she asked him after the Seder what he thought. And he said, well, you didn't do it. You didn't actually kill a lamb. And in Islam, for the sacrifice of what they say is, not Isaac, but Ishmael, they actually kill a lamb at that time, but it's similar. What they follow is similar to the Passover ritual at that point.
All right. Well, all this is so good. And man, have I enjoyed this. Look forward to, I will hopefully be able to upload this soon and to YouTube. It will have to be either later today or I might not even be able to get to it very soon, but I will upload it as soon as I can. And I will also send out some emails with you. You'll have access to my spreadsheets. And if you want a hard copy, I think we even probably have some cardstock paper that's 11 by 17. If not, I might have to go get some. I'll be happy to make a printout for you, and you can have a printout of the different timelines. I'll still maybe work on the Friday one, but I don't have that one completed yet. So anyway, guys, this has been wonderful. I've really enjoyed this, and thank you all for being a part of this. And
Thank you.
anybody has
Thank
any
you.
suggestions on what you want to do next, let me know. And at the moment, though, we'll probably just take a little bit of a break. And I'm this week is something else for me because we've got Monday, Thursday service at 7:00 tomorrow, and then we've got Good Friday at 7:00 on Friday, and then Easter Sunday we have 3 services. 6:30 is our sunrise service. And then we're also going to do 9:15 outside and 10:45 inside. If there's bad weather, we're only going to do the inside 10:45 service. So that just might impact you. But I've also invited another church and pastor to come and join us for the sunrise service. And so I think there's going to be a few folks from the church that will come at the sunrise. So if you're an early riser and you want to come out, 6:30, I'd love to have you and introduce you to some other brothers and sisters in another congregation that may come and worship with us that morning. So, all right, everybody. Well, God bless, and great to see you all, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks.
Paul, it was
Thank you.
wonderful.